Now we're moving on to the next chapter or topic, which is ethical and legal issues. Our reference is still Saunders' Comprehensive Review for the NCLEX-RN examination by Linda N. Silvestri and Angela E. Silvestri. Ethics is defined as the branch of philosophy concerned with the distinction between right and wrong on the basis of a body of knowledge and only on the basis of opinions. Morals. It is a behavior in accordance with customs or tradition, usually reflecting personal or religious beliefs. Ethical principles. These are codes that direct or govern nursing actions. Number 1 is autonomy, which is defined as respect for an individual's right to self-determination. Non-maleficence, the obligation to do or cause no harm to another. Beneficence, the duty to do good to others and to maintain a balance between benefits and harms. Justice, the equitable distribution of potential benefits and tasks, determining the order in which clients should be cared for. Veracity, the obligation to tell the truth. Fidelity, the duty to do what one has promised. Values are beliefs and attitudes that may influence behavior and the process of decision-making. Ethical codes provide broad principles for determining and evaluating client care. These are not legally binding, and there are 2 ethical codes that apply to nurses. 1, the Code of Ethics for Nurses. 2, the American Nurses Association Code of Ethics. Ethical dilemma. It occurs when there is a conflict between 2 or more ethical principles. No correct decision exists, and the nurse must make the choice between 2 alternatives that are equally unsatisfactory. Such dilemmas may occur as a result of differences in cultural or religious beliefs. Ethical reasoning is the process of thinking through what one should do in an orderly and systematic manner to provide justification for actions based on principles. The nurse should gather all information to determine whether an ethical dilemma exists, examine his or her own values, verbalize the problem, consider possible courses of action, negotiate the outcome, and evaluate the action taken. Advocate is a person who speaks up for or acts on behalf of the client, protects the client's right to make his or her own decisions, and upholds the principle of fidelity. An advocate represents the client's viewpoint to others. An advocate avoids letting personal values influence advocacy for the client and supports the client's decision even when it conflicts with the advocate's own preferences or choices. An important nursing responsibility is to act as a client advocate and protect the client's rights. Ethics committees. They take an interprofessional approach to facilitate dialogue regarding ethical dilemmas. These committees develop and establish policies and procedures to facilitate the prevention and resolution of dilemmas. Nurse Practice Act. This is under Regulation of Nursing Practice. It is a series of statutes that have been enacted by each state legislature to regulate the practice of nursing in that state. Nurse Practice Acts set educational requirements for the nurse, distinguish between nursing practice and medical practice, and define the scope of nursing practice. Additional issues covered by Nurse Practice Acts include licensure requirements for protection of the public, grounds for disciplinary action, rights of the nurse licensee if a disciplinary action is taken, and related topics. Standards of care. These are guidelines that identify what the client can expect to receive in terms of nursing care. The guidelines determine whether nurses have performed duties in an appropriate manner. If the nurse does not perform duties within accepted standards of care, the nurse may be in jeopardy of legal action. Employee guidelines. Respondeat superior. The employer is held liable for any negligent acts of an employee if the alleged negligent act occurred during the employment relationship and was within the scope of the employee's responsibilities. Contracts. Nurses are responsible for carrying out the terms of a contractual agreement with the employing agency and the client. The nurse-employee relationship is governed by established employee handbooks and client care policies and procedures that create obligations, rights, and duties between those parties. There are institutional policies and procedures. These were written of the employing institution to detail how nurses are to perform their duties. Policies and procedures are usually specific and describe the expected behavior on the part of the nurse. Although policies are not laws, courts generally rule against nurses who violate policies. If the nurse practices nursing according to client care policies and procedures established by the employer, functions within the job responsibility, and provides care consistently in a non-negligent manner, the nurse minimizes the potential for liability. The nurse must follow the guidelines identified in the Nurse Practice Act and agency policies and procedures when delivering client care. Hospital staffing. Charges of abandonment may be made against nurses who walk out when staffing is inadequate. Nurses in short staffing situations are obligated to make a report to the nursing administration. Floating. Floating is an acceptable practice used by healthcare facilities to alleviate understaffing and overstaffing. Legally, the nurse cannot refuse to float unless a union contract guarantees that nurses can work only in a specified area or the nurse can prove lack of knowledge or the performance of assigned tasks. Nurses in floating situation must not assume responsibility beyond their level of experience or qualification. Nurses who float should inform the supervisor of any lack of experience in caring for the type of clients on the new nursing unit. A resource nurse who is skilled in the care of clients on the unit should also be assigned the float nurse. In addition, the float nurse should be given an orientation of the unit, and the standards of care for the unit should be reviewed. The float nurse should care for clients whose acuity level more closely match the nurse experience. Disciplinary action. Boards of nursing may deny, revoke, or suspend any license to practice as a registered nurse according to their statutory authority. Some causes for disciplinary action are as follows: unprofessional conduct, conduct that could affect the health and welfare of the public adversely, breach of client and confidentiality, failure to use sufficient knowledge, skills, or nursing judgment, physically or verbally abusing a client, assuming duties without sufficient preparation, knowingly delegating to unlicensed personnel nursing care that places the client at risk for injury, failure to maintain an accurate record for each client, falsifying a client's record, leaving a nursing assignment without properly notifying appropriate personnel.